The multiverse screams when gods bleed between realities. Loki Lofison had experienced many indignities across his 1,000 years of existence: imprisonment in Asgardian dungeons, humiliation before the Avengers, even death itself, temporary though it proved. But tumbling through the shredded fabric of dimensional barriers while cosmic energies tore at his very essence ranked among the more unpleasant afternoons. The Bifrost had fractured during his attempt to redirect its energies for what he'd insist was a perfectly reasonable scheme involving Midgardian politics and a substantial amount of schadenfreude. The Rainbow Bridge had splintered, reality had screamed, and Loki had fallen into somewhere distinctly wrong. He crashed through the roof of a London pub at midnight. The establishment, a grimy affair called the Devil's Advocate, fitting in its irony, exploded in a shower of broken timber and ancient shingles. Patrons scattered as the god of mischief cratered into the floor, his Asgardian armor smoking with residual dimensional energy. For a moment Loki lay still, cataloging his injuries: bruised ribs, dislocated shoulder. Pride was thoroughly trampled. His magic flickered weakly around him, the familiar green energy sputtering like a dying candle. Something was wrong. The very air tasted different here, charged with a kind of raw mystical potential he'd never encountered, even in the 9 realms. "Well," drawled a voice thick with Liverpudlian accent and decades of cigarette smoke, "that's a new one. Usually when blokes fall through my ceiling, they've got the decency to be demons I've already pissed off." Loki's eyes snapped open. A man stood at the bar, utterly unfazed by the godly intrusion. He wore a rumpled trench coat over a loosened tie, blonde hair disheveled, a cigarette dangling from his lips. But it was his eyes that caught Loki's attention, old eyes, eyes that had seen things mortals shouldn't witness and survived through cunning rather than power. A kindred spirit, perhaps, in the art of the con. "John Constantine," the man introduced himself, taking a long drag. "And you, mate, reek of wrong universe magical bullshit. So before my pub gets any more demolished, how about you tell me what Norse god just decided to redecorate?" Loki pulled himself upright, his shoulders snapping back into place with a wet pop. His magic responded sluggishly to his call, the illusions he summoned to restore his appearance flickering like bad television reception. "Concerning, very concerning. Loki of Asgard," he replied, forcing himself to stand despite his body's protests. "And I assure you this was not my intended destination. Where precisely am I?" "London, Earth, but not your Earth, obviously." Constantine gestured vaguely with his cigarette. "You've gone and fallen through the cracks into a whole different universe, haven't you? One where magic works a bit differently than whatever Asgardian nonsense you're used to." Before Loki could respond, the pub's door exploded inward. Not kicked open, exploded, hinges and all, as if something with god-tier strength had grown impatient with conventional entry. A figure stepped through the smoking doorway, cape billowing despite the absence of wind. The symbol on his chest, a stylized within a diamond, caught what little light remained in the devastated pub, except it wasn't Superman. The resemblance was there, certainly. Same build, same cape, same impossible presence that screamed otherworldly power. But this man's costume was darker, the symbol twisted, and his eyes glowed with a red that promised violence rather than hope. Loki's tactical mind, honed by centuries of surviving conflicts with beings far stronger than himself, immediately categorized this as dire threat. "Constantine," the dark Superman said, voice cold. The watchtower detected a massive magical disturbance. "You want to explain why reality just tore open over your favorite drinking hole?" "Not my doing for once," Constantine replied, seemingly unconcerned by the powerful being who just demolished his door. "We've got a visitor. Loki meets Superman, or rather one of his dimensional echoes. This universe is bloody lousy with alternate versions wandering about." "I am from Prime Earth," Superman corrected, his tone suggesting this was an important distinction. As his eyes scanned Loki, the red glow faded to normal blue, though suspicion remained etched in every line of his face. "Another universe hopper. Perfect. Batman's going to love this." Loki's mind raced, adapting to new information with the speed of a creature who'd survived apocalypses through quick thinking. Different universe, magic that operated on unfamiliar principles, beings of Superman's obvious power level, multiple versions of them apparently. And beneath it all, he could sense something, a darker undercurrent to this reality, as if the very fabric of this universe had been stained by conflicts his own had never witnessed. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. Batman, Loki repeated, testing the name. I assume another colorful champion, perhaps themed after a small nocturnal mammal. The sarcasm came naturally, a defense mechanism against the unsettling sensation of his magic continuing to misfire. He attempted a simple duplication spell, something he could perform since childhood, and managed only a flickering half-image before it dissolved into green sparks. Superman's eyes narrowed. You're weakened. Your magic isn't working properly here. Observant, Loki bit out. The dimensional transit was rough, and your universe's mystical framework appears incompatible with Asgardian sorcery. I'll adapt given time. Time's not something we're inclined to give unknown quantities, Superman said. His hand moved to something on his belt, a communication device. I'm bringing you to the Watchtower. The Justice League will decide what to do with you. The Justice League, Constantine interjected, finally stepping between them, might want to handle this one carefully. He's a god, yeah, but not the smite you with lightning for fun kind. More the light your face and steal your throne variety, which means he's exactly the sort of manipulative bastard who could cause real problems if you lot go all authoritarian on him. Loki found himself appreciating the magician's assessment, even as it highlighted his current vulnerability. In his own universe, he'd have multiple escape routes planned by now. Here, with his magic sputtering and facing a being who could apparently move faster than light and punch through planets, his options were distinctly limited. I have no interest in conquering your world, Loki said, choosing truth for once. I simply wish to understand where I am and how to return home. Surely your league has encountered dimensional travelers before. Quaintly, Superman admitted, and about half of them tried to destroy everything, so you'll understand our caution. He pressed the communicator. Batman, we have a situation. Foreign deity, magical in nature, claims accidental arrival. I'm bringing him in. The response came immediately, a gravelly voice that sent an unexpected chill down Loki's spine. Not from power, this Batman possessed no superhuman abilities that Loki could sense, but from the cold calculation in every syllable. Scan him first. Full magical and technological analysis. Don't bring anything into the Watchtower until we know what we're dealing with. Loki bristled at being referred to as anything, but held his tongue. The situation required assessment, not ego. He was in an unknown universe, weakened, facing opponents whose power levels and capabilities remained mysterious. For once, cooperation seemed the wisest path, at least until he understood the board and could begin moving pieces. Constantine caught his eye and smirked, as if reading his thoughts. Word of advice, your godliness, Batman's already 3 steps ahead of whatever scheme you're cooking up. He's got contingency plans for how to kill every member of his own team. You really think you're going to outthink him? I've manipulated frost giants, dark elves, and beings who predate your universe, Loki replied smoothly. I'm certain I can manage one mortal in a costume. The look Constantine and Superman exchanged suggested Loki had just made a critical error in judgment. Right then, Constantine sighed, lighting another cigarette from the embers of the first. This is going to be entertaining. Superman, before you haul him off to your space station, let me do a proper mystical analysis. I can tell you what flavor of godly bullshit we're dealing with, and whether he's going to explode if he tries to cast a spell in our magical framework. Superman nodded curtly. 5 minutes, then he comes with me. As Constantine began tracing symbols in the air, familiar mystical gestures but with entirely wrong energy signatures, Loki took stock of his situation. He was trapped in a universe where his magic barely functioned, where beings of immense power operated under the banner of justice, and where at least one mortal detective apparently posed a credible threat to gods. The Trinity, he'd later learn they were called. The Trinity of this world's champions. Through the pub's shattered roof, Loki could see unfamiliar constellations. Not just a different Earth then, a fundamentally different reality where even the stars themselves had been rewritten. The trickster god smiled despite himself. After all, he'd always performed best when the odds were impossible. Constantine's magical analysis washed over him, probing at his essence with uncomfortable precision. The magician whistled low. "Bugger me. He's not lying about the accidental arrival. His magical signature is completely foreign, doesn't match any pantheon I know. Norse adjacent but wrong somehow. And yeah, his power's being dampened by our universe's rules. He's running at maybe 85%, and it's costing him more energy to cast than it should." 85% of a god is still considerably dangerous, Superman observed. True enough, Constantine agreed. But here's the interesting bit, he's adapting. His magic's already starting to resonate with our mystical frequencies. Give him a few days and he'll be back to full capacity, just running on different rules. The question is what he does with that power once he's got it sorted. "Which is why he's coming with me now," Superman said. He moved with impossible speed, and before Loki could react, he felt the Kryptonian's hand on his shoulder, gentle, but with the promise of unstoppable force behind it. "You'll get a fair hearing, but you'll get it in secure conditions." As reality blurred and Superman carried him upward at speeds that should have liquefied a normal being, Loki caught one last glimpse of Constantine, who raised his cigarette in mocking salute. The god of mischief had arrived in a universe of gods who called themselves heroes, of mortals who challenged the divine, and of shadows that ran deeper than any he'd known. And somewhere in Gotham City, a dark knight was already calculating exactly how to kill him if it became necessary. Loki's smile widened. Finally, a challenge worthy of his talents. The watchtower hung in geosynchronous orbit above Earth, a monument to power that made even Asgard's golden halls seem quaint. Loki cataloged every detail as Superman deposited him in what was politely termed a holding area, but was transparently a cell. Reinforced walls humming with energy he couldn't identify. Magical wards woven through technological systems in a marriage of science and sorcery that his own universe had never achieved. And cameras, dozens of them, analyzing his every breath. Impressive, Loki admitted, running his fingers along the energy barrier that separated him from freedom. The field sparked against his touch, and he felt his magic recoil from contact. "Your league doesn't take chances." "We've learned not to," replied a woman's voice, strong and clear as a sword being drawn. She strode into view and Loki's breath caught despite himself. Not from attraction, though she was undeniably striking, but from the sheer presence she radiated. This was divinity recognizing divinity. She wore armor that blended ancient Greek aesthetics with modern practicality, a golden lasso coiled at her hip, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd been fighting since before Rome fell. "Wonder Woman," she introduced herself. "Princess Diana of the Messira, daughter of Hippolyta and Zeus." "Zeus," Loki repeated, his mind racing. "The Greek king of gods exists in this reality." "Existed," Diana corrected, her expression darkening. "He's dead now, as are most of the Olympians. This universe has little patience for gods who forget their purpose." The warning was clear. Loki inclined his head respectfully, one immortal to another. "Loki of Asgard, son of Loki and Odin, though the latter relationship is complicated. I assure you, princess, I have no intention of repeating whatever mistakes led to your pantheon's downfall. We'll see." Diana's hand rested on her lasso, and Loki recognized it immediately as an artifact of significant power. That is the lasso of truth. It compels absolute honesty from those it binds. Would you submit to questioning? Every instinct screamed refusal. The god of lies, bound by truth, it violated his fundamental nature. But Loki had survived this long by knowing when to fold a losing hand. And if I refuse? Then you remain in this cell until Batman completes his analysis and determines you're not a threat. That could take weeks, months. He's thorough. Diana's expression softened slightly. Or you can answer our questions honestly, prove your intentions are not hostile, and we can discuss how to return you to your universe. Your choice. Loki weighed his options with the speed of a creature who'd made impossible choices before. Weeks trapped in a cell while his magic adapted to this universe's rules, unable to gather intelligence or forge alliances. Unacceptable. Better to endure temporary honesty than prolonged imprisonment. Very well, he said. I'll submit to your lasso, but I want something in return, information about this universe and genuine assistance in finding a way home. Fair terms, Diana agreed. She gestured and the energy barrier dissolved. The truth for the truth. As the golden rope settled around his wrists, Loki felt reality itself compress around him. This was no mere magical artifact. It was conceptual power made manifest, the very idea of truth given physical form. Fighting it would be like arguing with mathematics. Are you here to conquer Earth? Diana asked. No. The word came without his permission, dragged from his throat by the lasso's power. Loki grimaced but continued, unable to stop himself. I have no interest in ruling this world. I was attempting to manipulate the Bifrost for my own purposes when something went catastrophically wrong. The dimensional breach was entirely accidental. What were those purposes? Meddling in Midgardian Earth politics in my universe. Nothing apocalyptic, simply stirring the pot. I enjoy chaos for its own sake. The admission stung his pride, but the lasso demanded complete honesty. Diana's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. At least you're honest about your nature. Do you intend harm to anyone in this universe? Not unless they threaten me first, Loki said. Then, because the lasso compelled complete truth, though I reserve the right to lie, manipulate, and generally cause mischief if it serves my purposes. It's what I am. Asking me not to scheme is like asking Superman not to fly. At least we know where we stand, came a new voice, and Loki's head snapped toward the doorway. The man who entered moved with predatory grace, wrapped in shadow despite the watchtower's bright lights. His costume was dark grays and blacks, a stylized bat symbol across his chest, and his eyes, visible only as white slits in his cowl, studied Loki with an intensity that made even gods uncomfortable. This was Batman, the mortal who supposedly could kill his own godlike teammates. Loki had faced down frost giants, dark elves, and the mad Titan himself, but something about Batman's analytical gaze made him feel like a specimen pinned under glass. Interesting, Batman said, circling the god like a shark. Your body language suggests you're accustomed to being the most intelligent person in any room, but right now you're afraid. Why? The lasso tightened. Because I can't read you, Loki admitted. Everyone has tells, physiological responses, patterns of thought, but you're a void. It's unsettling. Good. Batman produced a tablet displaying scans Loki recognized as his own mystical signature. Constantine's analysis was accurate. Your magic is adapting to our universe at an accelerating rate. In 72 hours, you'll be at full operational capacity. That makes you a potential threat. I'm always a potential threat, Loki replied smoothly. The question is whether I'm an actual one. That's what we're determining. Batman's fingers flew across the tablet. Diana, his heart rate and brain activity confirm he's being truthful under the lasso, but we both know tricksters can tell technical truths while hiding deeper lies. Loki, do you have any knowledge of threats to this Earth that we don't? None. I've been in your universe for approximately 2 hours. Are you working with any entities hostile to Earth? No. Do you serve any being who wishes Earth harm? I serve only myself, Loki said, and felt the lasso's approval of the statement's absolute honesty. Batman and Wonder Woman exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind that only came from years of partnership. Finally, Batman nodded. Release him from the lasso, he said, but he stays in the watchtower until we've established protocols. As Diana removed the golden rope, Loki flexed his wrists, feeling the return of his autonomy like a drowning man breaking the surface. Protocols. You're a magical entity of significant power who specializes in deception. Batman said flatly, if you're going to remain in this universe while we find a way to send you home, you'll follow rules. No unsupervised access to sensitive areas. No spell casting without prior approval from our magic specialists. And you'll wear this. He held up a slim bracelet of dark metal, inscribed with runes Loki recognized as mystical dampeners. Not strong enough to completely suppress his magic, but sufficient to prevent any apocalyptic scale casting. You want to leash me, Loki said coldly. I want insurance, Batman corrected. You admitted you can't help but scheme and manipulate. This ensures that whatever schemes you develop don't threaten innocent lives. Wear it voluntarily or Superman will put it on you by force. Your choice. Loki stared at the bracelet, then at Batman's implacable expression, then at Wonder Woman's ready stance. In the doorway behind them, he could sense Superman's presence. The Kryptonian hadn't left, merely stepped out of sight. They had him cornered, weakened, in unfamiliar territory. In other words, a typical Tuesday for the god of mischief. I'll wear your trinket, Loki said, extending his wrist. But I want access to your magical archives. If I'm to adapt my sorcery to this universe's framework, I need to understand how your magic operates. And I want to speak with this Constantine. He seems to actually understand the mystical rather than merely cataloging it like a particularly obsessive librarian. Batman's jaw tightened at the jab, but he snapped the bracelet closed around Loki's wrist. Immediately, Loki felt his magic constrict, channeled into narrower pathways. Uncomfortable but not debilitating. Zatanna will supervise your magical education, Batman said. Constantine is unreliable. Which is precisely why I want to speak with him, Loki countered. I trust the unreliable far more than the righteous. They're more honest about their dishonesty. Diana actually smiled at that. You'd like John. He'd probably hate you, but you'd like him. Before the conversation could continue, alarms blared throughout the watchtower. Red lights bathed the corridor as a computerized voice announced, boom tube activity detected. Apocalyptian energy signature. Threat level, Omega. Batman's entire demeanor shifted, tension coiling through him like a spring. Darkseid. Darkseid, Loki repeated, tasting the name and finding it ominous. The Lord of Apocalypse, Wonder Woman explained, already moving toward the command center. A new god who seeks to enslave all free will in the universe. If he's making a move, it's because he sensed the dimensional breach, Batman finished. He turned to Loki, and for the first time, the god saw something other than calculation in the Dark Knight's eyes. Concern. Your arrival tore a hole in reality. Every major player in the cosmic hierarchy would have felt it. And Darkseid is always looking for new weapons to add to his arsenal. Loki's blood ran cold. He'd dealt with conquerors before, Thanos, chief among them. But the way these heroes spoke of Darkseid, the genuine fear beneath their tactical preparations, suggested something worse than a mere warlord. They reached the command center to find Superman already at the controls, his face grim. On the main view screen, a massive portal of fire and darkness had opened above Metropolis, and stepping through it, flanked by an army of shrieking parademons, came a being that radiated power like a nuclear furnace. Darkseid stood 12 feet tall, skin like cracked stone, eyes glowing with red Omega energy. His presence alone seemed to warp reality around him, gravity bending to accommodate his will. When he spoke, his voice resonated through dimensions. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. I come not for conquest today, but for the anomaly. The foreign god who bleeds between Realities. Surrender HIM2ME and Metropolis remains intact. Loki felt every eye in the command center turn toward him. Well, he said, fighting to keep his voice steady, I seem to be popular already. Superman's jaw clenched. We don't trade lives, not even trickster gods we just met. How noble, Darkseid's voice echoed. And how predictable, very well, I shall take him by force. MYPARADMONS hunger. The transmission cut off. Immediately, the Justice League exploded into coordinated action, Batman barking orders, Wonder Woman calling for her sword and shield, Superman preparing to descend to Metropolis. In the chaos, Loki stood frozen, his tactical mind racing through scenarios. He could run, teleport away, hide in the chaos, let these heroes deal with the consequences of his arrival. It was the smart play, the survivor's choice. But the lasso's words echoed in his memory. This universe has little patience for gods who forget their purpose. And beneath the fear, beneath the self-preservation instinct, Loki felt something he'd thought Thanos had beaten out of him. The desire to be more than the villain in someone else's story. I can help, he heard himself say. Batman turned, suspicion radiating from every line of his body. How? I know conquerors, Loki said. I know tyrants, and I know that beings like Darkseid don't make personal appearances for simple acquisitions. He's testing you, testing how you respond to threats against outsiders. This is about more than just me. He's right, Wonder Woman said grimly, buckling her sword belt. Darkseid is always playing a deeper game. Then we need a deeper strategy, Batman said. He looked at Loki, and the gods saw calculation warring with distrust. You want to prove you're not a threat, prove you're an asset. Help us defend Metropolis and we'll help you get home. Loki smiled, and for once, there was no deception in it. Just the fierce joy of a trickster facing impossible odds. Let's go meet a new god, he said. I do so enjoy disappointing would-be conquerors. As the Justice League teleported down to Metropolis, Loki felt his magic surging against the dampening bracelet, adapting faster than Batman's instruments could measure. This universe had different rules, yes. But chaos was chaos, and Loki had always been its master. Metropolis burned. Loki materialized alongside the Justice League in the heart of Superman City, and the contrast between its usual gleaming optimism and current devastation struck him immediately. Parademons, grotesque winged horrors that screamed with mechanical voices, swarmed through streets designed for hope, not war. Civilians fled in panic as the creatures dragged victims toward swirling boom tubes, their destination undoubtedly the nightmare factories of apocalypse. Spread out, Batman commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos with military precision. Superman, air superiority. Diana, ground forces. Flash, evacuations. Cyborg, shut down those boom tubes if you can. Loki. Stay out of the way, the trickster god supplied dryly. Prove you're useful, Batman corrected. Your magic is limited, but your tactical mind isn't. Find Darkseid's real objective. This is a diversion. Before Loki could respond, Superman launched skyward in a blur of red and blue, colliding with a swarm of parademons hard enough to create a shockwave that shattered windows 3 blocks away. Wonder Woman charged into the fray with her sword, singing, each strike felling multiple creatures. A red and yellow blur resolved into the Flash, moving so fast he seemed to be in 20 places simultaneously, pulling civilians from collapsing buildings. And from a nearby rooftop, Darkseid watched with arms folded, his Omega Beam eyes tracking Loki specifically. The god of mischief felt the weight of that ancient gaze and understood immediately what Batman had already calculated. This wasn't about conquest. This was an interview. Well, Loki muttered, when opportunity presents itself so dramatically, it would be rude not to respond. He reached for his magic and felt the dampening bracelet resist, choking his power to a fraction of its potential. But Loki had spent a millennium learning to do more with less, to turn weakness into advantage, to make illusions so convincing they became more real than truth. The bracelet limited his raw power, yes. It did nothing to restrain his creativity. A parademon dove toward him, claws extended. Loki didn't blast it with energy he couldn't spare. Instead, he crafted an illusion, simple, cheap, effective. The creature suddenly perceived the empty air beside Loki as a more valuable target and veered off, crashing into a storefront. 3 more followed, all chasing phantoms only they could see. Interesting, Darkseid's voice boomed across the battlefield. The trickster fights with lies even when truth would serve better. You are what I expected, Loki of Asgard. Loki's blood froze. You know my name. I know all who bleed between Realities. I have watched infinite Earths rise and fall. Your universe is but one thread in the tapestry I seek to unravel. Darkseid stepped off the rooftop, falling 3 stories to land with an impact that cracked the pavement. You have something I require. Not your power, that is pedestrian, but your knowledge. The anti-life equation exists in every reality, hidden behind different formula. You will tell me how it manifests in your universe. I don't know what you're talking about, Loki said, backing away as Darkseid advanced. His mind raced, analyzing the new god with the same tactical precision he'd once used to infiltrate Jotunheim. Immense physical power, clearly. Energy projection via those omega beams. But more than that, a presence that suggested this being had transcended mere godhood into something fundamental to existence itself. In other words, exactly the kind of opponent Loki had no chance of defeating in direct combat. You lie poorly when frightened, Darkseid observed. I admire that. Fear makes mortals honest. Gods, however, should know better. The omega beams lanced from Darkseid's eyes without warning. Loki threw himself sideways and the crimson energy carved through the space he'd occupied, tracking him with impossible precision. The beams curved mid-flight, seeking him like heat-seeking missiles. Loki's illusions scattered, a dozen false Lokis sprinting in different directions. The omega beams ignored them all, locked onto his true position through whatever cosmic awareness Darkseid possessed. The god of mischief dove behind an overturned car, felt the metal vaporize as the beams tore through it, and realized with crystalline clarity that he was about to die. Then Superman arrived. The Kryptonian intercepted the omega beams with his own body, and Loki watched in shock as the energy that should have disintegrated him simply stopped. Superman grimaced, veins standing out in his neck as he absorbed the attack, then redirected it harmlessly into the sky. You want him, you go through me, Superman said, positioning himself between Loki and Darkseid. Always the noble fool, Darkseid replied. Very well. They clashed with the sound of continents colliding. The shockwave from Superman's first punch sent Loki tumbling backward, his Asgardian durability the only thing preventing liquefaction. These beings operated on a scale that made Thor's battles seem like playground scuffles. Raw power expressed without restraint, the kind of combat that reshaped landscapes. Loki, Batman's voice crackled through a communicator that had somehow attached itself to the trickster's collar. Stop gawking and think. Darkseid mentioned the anti-life equation. Do you know what that is? Never heard of it, Loki gasped, scrambling to his feet. It's the mathematical proof that free will is meaningless. If Darkseid obtains it, he can enslave every sentient being in existence. He thinks you might have information about how it manifests in your universe. I don't, Loki froze. Actually, he might. Thanos had sought something similar once, a cosmic formula that would justify his genocidal mission. The Mad Titan had called it the proof of perfection, believing it would demonstrate that his brutal culling was mathematically necessary. Loki had dismissed it as madness, but if it was a variant of this anti-life equation. He's fishing, Loki realized. He doesn't know if I have the information. He's trying to provoke a reaction, see if I even recognize the concept. Which you just did, Batman said grimly. He's reading your body language even while fighting Superman. Darkseid is always thinking 3 moves ahead. Then I'll think 4, Loki snapped. His magic surged against the bracelet, and he felt something give. Not the dampener breaking, but his power adapting, flowing around the restriction like water finding cracks in stone. The DC Universe's mystical framework was starting to make sense, resonating with his Asgardian sorcery in unexpected harmonies. He wove an illusion more complex than any he'd attempted since arriving. Not a simple visual trick, but a narrative, a story Darkseid's cosmic awareness would interpret as truth. Loki crafted the image of himself fleeing in terror, babbling about formulae and equations, leading the new god on a chase away from populated areas. Darkseid's eyes flickered toward the illusion for just a fraction of a second. That was all Superman needed. The Kryptonian's uppercut caught Darkseid's jaw with the force of a nuclear detonation, sending the new god crashing through 3 buildings. But Darkseid was already recovering, Omega beams carving through rubble, and Loki knew this stalemate could continue for hours while the city crumbled around them. "We need to end this differently," he muttered, then louder. "Batman, I have an idea, but you're going to hate it." "I already hate it," Batman replied. "Explain anyway." "Darkseid wants information I don't actually possess, but he doesn't know that for certain. He's probing, testing. What if we give him what he expects? Not the truth, but a lie so perfectly crafted that even his cosmic awareness accepts it. You want to deceive a new god who's existed for eons. I want to give him a reason to leave without getting Metropolis destroyed, yes." Loki ducked as a car flew overhead, thrown by a parademon. "I'll need the dampener removed temporarily, and I'll need Constantine. His magic is rooted in deception and deals. Together, we might craft something believable." The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Loki could almost hear Batman's mind calculating probabilities, weighing risks. "Do it," Batman said finally. "But if this goes wrong, you'll activate whatever kill switch you've already designed for me." "Yes, I gathered that." Loki felt the bracelet click open, and his magic flooded back at full strength, now harmonized with this universe's mystical frequencies. It sang through him like a symphony finally played in the correct key. Reality rippled as Loki reached across dimensions, not to travel but to communicate. "Constantine, I know you're watching this disaster. I need your expertise in lying to cosmic entities." The magician's voice came through mystical channels, sounding entirely too amused. "You've got bollocks, I'll give you that. What's the play? We're going to sell Darkseid the most beautiful lie he's ever heard. One that sends him chasing shadows in the multiverse while we figure out how to actually send me home." Constantine's laughter crackled with dark joy. "I'm in. Start the illusion and I'll weave the mystical resonance to make it feel ancient and true. Give the bastard a treasure map to nowhere." Loki smiled and began to work. His magic painted reality with impossible precision, crafting not just images but sensations, emotions, cosmic truths that felt older than creation. He wove in fragments of the proof of perfection that Thanos had sought, twisted them into unfamiliar mathematics, and presented them as pieces of a puzzle scattered across the multiverse. Constantine added layers of mystical authentication, making the false information resonate with the same frequency as genuine cosmic secrets. Together, they created a masterpiece of deception. Darkseid paused mid-battle with Superman, his attention snapping to Loki with laser focus. "What have you done?" "Given you what you wanted," Loki replied, letting exhaustion creep into his voice, real exhaustion, for this spell was costing him everything. "Fragments of the equation from my universe, but they're incomplete, scattered across dimensional boundaries your boom tubes can't easily reach. You'll need to search for them, hunt them. And every moment you waste here is a moment someone else might find them first." The lie was perfect because it contained truth. The equation fragments didn't exist, but the possibility that they might was enough. And Darkseid, for all his power, was ultimately driven by the same force that motivated all tyrants: fear of losing his advantage. "You risk much, Trickster," Darkseid said, his Omega eyes studying Loki with new interest. "If this is deception, then you'll destroy me," Loki interrupted. "But if it's the truth and you ignore it, your enemies will claim the equation before you. That's rather the point of free will, isn't it? The uncertainty that makes gods into gamblers." For a long moment, Darkseid stood perfectly still. Around them, the battle had paused, parademons hovering uncertainly, the Justice League poised for continued combat. The entire city seemed to hold its breath. Then Darkseid smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Loki had ever witnessed. "You would have made an excellent servant," the new god said. "Perhaps, when I have the equation, I will return for you, teach you to kneel." "I look forward to disappointing you," Loki replied, keeping his voice steady through sheer force of will. Darkseid raised one massive hand and the boom tubes roared to life. Parademons streamed back through the portals, abandoning their prey. The new god himself turned toward the largest aperture, then paused. "Superman, tell your Batman that his new asset is more dangerous than he realizes. Trickstrs, who can lie to gods, rarely stop at just one deception." Then he was gone, the boom tubes collapsing behind him, leaving Metropolis battered but standing. Loki sank to his knees, his magic completely spent. The dampening bracelet clicked back around his wrist. Batman's doing, undoubtedly, remotely activated the moment the threat passed. Around him, the Justice League converged, their expressions ranging from grateful to suspicious. "Did you actually give him pieces of the anti-life equation?" Superman asked quietly. "I gave him a wild goose chase across the multiverse," Loki replied. "Whether he believes it long enough for you to prepare proper defenses, that depends on how paranoid and ambitious he is." "So, very yes," Constantine's voice came from behind them. The magician had appeared at some point during the chaos, cigarette already lit. "Darkseid won't be able to resist checking, and every universe he searches without finding what you promised will make him angrier." "Making Darkseid angry seems counterproductive," Wonder Woman observed. "Making him waste time and resources on a false lead buys Earth breathing room," Batman said. He studied Loki with an expression the god couldn't quite read. "That was reckless, manipulative, and dangerous. It was also tactically sound. You saved thousands of lives." "Don't sound so surprised," Loki said, accepting Superman's offered hand to stand. "I'm the god of mischief, not the god of letting innocents die in crossfire. There's a difference." "Is there?" Batman asked. "Or is that just another lie you tell yourself?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Loki met Batman's gaze and found himself unable to answer, because the truth, the real, lasso-compelled truth, was that he didn't know anymore. He'd spent so long being the villain in other people's stories that he'd stopped asking what kind of god he actually wanted to be. "Come on," Diana said, breaking the tension. "We need to debrief, and Loki needs medical attention. That spell nearly killed you." "I've had worse," Loki muttered, but he didn't resist when Cyborg opened a boom tube back to the watchtower. As they stepped through, he caught Constantine's eye. The magician winked. "Welcome to the DC universe, mate, where the heroes are paranoid, the villains are philosophical, and everybody's one bad day away from becoming the thing they fight. You're going to fit right in." Loki wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning, probably both. The Watchtower's medical bay hummed with technology that made even Asgard's healing chambers seem primitive. Loki lay on a diagnostic table while machines he didn't understand scanned his depleted magical reserves. Cyborg monitored the readings with his integrated systems, while Batman stood in the corner like a particularly judgmental gargoyle. "You burned through 93% of your available magical energy in that single spell," Cyborg reported. "At current regeneration rates, you'll need 48 hours to return to full capacity." "Fantastic," Loki muttered. "I'm defenseless in a universe where cosmic tyrants now have a personal interest in me. Wonderful first week." "You're not defenseless," Superman said, entering the bay with Wonder Woman. "You're under Justice League protection. Darkseid won't risk open war over one individual." "Won't he?" Loki sat up despite Cyborg's protest. "I just lied to a new god. When he realizes I sent him chasing phantoms across the multiverse, he'll return with considerably less patience for negotiation." "Which gives us time to prepare," Batman said, "and to determine if you're worth the trouble of protecting." The bluntness was almost refreshing. Loki had dealt with enough false pleasantries to appreciate someone who simply stated their calculations openly. "A fair question. What would constitute worth in your assessment?" "Information," Batman said, stepping forward. You claimed you know conquerors and tyrants. Your universe has equivalents to our threats. I want everything you know about how they think, how they operate, their weaknesses. You want me to be your consultant on tyranny. I want tactical intelligence from someone who survived dealing with beings like Darkseid. Batman pulled up a holographic display showing various cosmic threats. You mentioned Thanos earlier. The lasso confirmed that name before we removed it. Who is he? Loki's expression darkened. Even here, across dimensional boundaries, the Mad Titan's shadow followed him. Thanos of Titan, a being who believes the universe is fundamentally flawed and can only be saved through mass genocide. He sought to collect artifacts of immense power, infinity stones in our reality, that would allow him to eliminate half of all life with a snap of his fingers. The room fell silent. Wonder Woman's hand moved unconsciously to her sword. Superman's jaw clenched. Even Batman's perpetual scowl deepened. Did he succeed? Superman asked quietly. Yes, the word tasted like ash. For 5 years, half of all living things across the universe simply ceased to exist, including me, though I died earlier trying to stop him with a blade when I should have been cleverer. Loki's fingers traced absent patterns in the air, an old nervous habit. We eventually reversed it, but the scars remain. Entire civilizations collapsed in the interim. Trust shattered. Heroes broke. And you knew him personally, Batman observed. It wasn't a question. He raised me in a sense. After my falling out with Asgard, I ended up in his service, briefly, long enough to understand that he was utterly, genuinely committed to his genocidal vision. He believed himself a hero. Loki met Batman's eyes. That's what made him so dangerous. Not his power, though that was considerable, but his absolute certainty that he was right. As Superman could be, Batman said softly, and Loki saw understanding flash across the Dark Knight's face. If he decided humanity needed saving from itself. Bruce, Superman started. It's a valid point, Wonder Woman interjected. We've seen alternate timelines where you became a tyrant, Clark. The Injustice universe, the Justice Lord's reality. Power without doubt is how gods become monsters. Loki watched the byplay with fascination. These heroes actively discussed their potential for corruption, planned for their own theoretical betrayals. In his universe, the Avengers had barely tolerated each other on good days. Here, the Justice League seemed to have weaponized paranoia into a functional strategy. This is why you keep contingencies, Loki said to Batman. Not because you distrust your allies, but because you understand that anyone with sufficient power can be compromised. Finally, someone gets it, Batman replied. Constantine thinks I'm paranoid. Superman thinks I'm cynical, but you understand. I've been the compromised party before, Loki admitted. Mind control, manipulation, my own worst impulses given free rein. If someone had possessed the means to stop me, genuinely stop me, not just appeal to my better nature, countless lives might have been saved. The honesty surprised even him. Perhaps his magical exhaustion had lowered his defenses, or perhaps this universe's emphasis on brutal truth-telling was contagious. Either way, he'd revealed more vulnerability than he'd intended. We need to talk about what happens next, Diana said, her tone gentler now. You can't return to your universe until we understand how you arrived and can safely reverse the process. Dr. Fate and Zatanna are analyzing the dimensional breach, but it could take weeks. What will you do in the meantime? Cause mischief, presumably, Loki said dryly. It's rather in the job description. Or you could help us, Superman suggested. You've already proven you can think tactically under pressure. We have threats beyond Darkseid, magic users running unchecked, dimensional incursions, cosmic entities that make the new gods look provincial. Someone with your experience might spot patterns we've missed. You want to recruit me to the Justice League? Loki couldn't keep the incredulity from his voice. Probationary membership, Batman corrected, with restrictions, oversight, and the understanding that one betrayal ends with you in the Phantom Zone indefinitely. The Phantom Zone, Kryptonian prison dimension, Cyborg explained. Time moves differently there. You'd spend subjective centuries in isolation. How thoroughly unpleasant, Loki said. And if I refuse this generous offer? Then you stay confined to the watchtower until we can send you home, Batman said. Comfortable, safe, but ultimately imprisoned, your choice. It was the same choice Loki always faced, cage or conditional freedom. He'd chosen the latter on Asgard, accepting Thor's authority in exchange for not rotting in a cell. He'd chosen it with Thanos, serving the mad Titan to avoid execution. And now these heroes offered the same bargain: behave, contribute, and earn limited autonomy. The difference, Loki realized, was that these heroes actually seemed interested in whether he'd choose to be better. Batman's contingencies assumed the worst, yes, but Superman's offer assumed the possibility of the best. It was unusual. I'll need access to magical resources, Loki said finally. If I'm to be useful, I need to fully adapt my sorcery to this universe's framework. And I want Constantine's mentorship. He understands deception magic in ways your more righteous spellcasters don't. Zatanna is more powerful, Batman countered. Zatanna is more powerful, yes, but Constantine is more creative. He survived this long by being cleverer than everyone trying to kill him, which is exactly the skill set I need to learn for this reality. Wonder Woman smiled. You've assessed our team dynamics remarkably quickly. I'm a trickster god who survived a millennium of court politics and cosmic conflicts. Reading people is my primary survival skill. Loki stood, testing his legs, still shaky but functional. If I'm to be your probationary villain turned reluctant hero, I should meet the full team properly. Most of them are already here, Cyborg said, gesturing toward the door. Flash has been vibrating outside the medical bay for 20 minutes, desperate to ask you questions. Green Lantern is arguing with Constantine about magical theory. And Shazam is just excited. We have an actual mythological god who isn't trying to kill him. Shazam, kid who transforms into a magical powerhouse by shouting a wizard's name, Superman explained. He channels the powers of 6 different gods: Solomon's wisdom, Hercules' strength, Atlas's stamina, Zeus's power, Achilles' courage, Mercury's speed. Loki blinked. Your universe has a mortal who casually channels Zeus, the same Zeus who sired Wonder Woman. It's complicated, Diana said with a wry smile. Welcome to DC, where mythology is less legend and more Tuesday afternoon. The door burst open, and a blur of red and yellow resolved into a young man wearing a lightning bolt emblem and the most enthusiastic smile Loki had ever witnessed. Hi, I'm the Flash Barry Allen, and oh my god, you're actually from another universe. What's it like? Do you have a Flash there? Is magic real there too, or is it all science-based? Can you really shapeshift, or is that just illusions? Sorry, I know I'm talking fast, but I'm literally vibrating with excitement and... Flash, Batman said, his tone carrying the weight of 1,000 previous interruptions. Breathe. Right, sorry, breathing. Barry took an exaggerated breath, then immediately continued. But seriously, another universe. Do you know how cool that is? We've had dimensional visitors before, but usually they're trying to destroy everything, and you actually help save Metropolis, so... Barry, Superman said gently. I'm done. Barry mimed zipping his lips, though his feet continued bouncing at speeds that suggested he was burning nervous energy just standing still. Behind him, a man in a green and black uniform floated into the room, surrounded by a glowing green aura. Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, Loki's tactical mind supplied from earlier briefings. The ring on his finger pulsed with barely contained power, and his eyes studied Loki with the wariness of a cop encountering a known criminal. So this is the god who nearly got himself killed playing chicken with Darkseid, Hal said. You've got guts, I'll give you that. Stupidity too, but mostly guts. I prefer calculated risk-taking, Loki replied smoothly. And you're the one who channels willpower into hard-like constructs. Fascinating. In my universe, the Infinity Stones. Don't compare our tech to your rocks, Hal interrupted, though Loki caught the flicker of competitive interest in his eyes. The emotional spectrum is a fundamental cosmic force. What have you got? 6 artifacts that control time, space, reality, power, mind, and soul. Individually, they grant godlike abilities. Together, they allow the wielder to reshape existence itself. Loki paused. though I suppose your emotional spectrum sounds moderately impressive as well. Hal's construct flickered, a middle finger made of green light. Loki laughed despite himself. I like him, Constantine's voice came from the doorway. The magician leaned against the frame, somehow making casual slouching look like an art form. He's a mouthy git who'll probably betray everyone eventually, but at least he's got style. Praise from you, Zatanna said, appearing beside Constantine. She wore a magician's stage outfit, top hat, tailcoat, fishnets, that somehow managed to be both theatrical and genuinely threatening. Her eyes glowed with barely suppressed magical power. I'm Zatanna. I'll be supervising your magical education since Constantine can't be trusted not to teach you the worst possible spells first. I resent that, Constantine said. I'd teach him the worst spells third at least. Got to build trust first. See what I mean? Zatanna sighed. But he's right that you'll need training. Your Asgardian magic is adapting, but you're still casting inefficiently. You're trying to force your universe's rules onto ours instead of learning to work within our framework. I'm self-taught, Loki said, feeling oddly defensive. Frigga showed me the basics, but most of my sorcery came from trial and error across centuries. Frigga, Zatanna's eyes widened. As in the Norse goddess, she was real in your universe. Is real. And yes, though the relationship between myth and reality is complicated. Loki felt the familiar ache of homesickness, quickly suppressed. She was the only mother who ever treated me as more than a political liability or convenient tool. The room quieted at that admission. Even Constantine's perpetual smirk faded slightly. Well then, Zatanna said briskly, we'll honor her teaching by making sure you don't accidentally blow yourself up trying to cast in our reality. The first lesson starts tomorrow after you've recovered. Constantine can watch if he promises not to corrupt my curriculum. No promises, Constantine replied, lighting another cigarette despite the watchtower's presumably strict no-smoking policy. But I'll behave, mostly. A boom tube opened in the corner of the medical bay, apparently standard protocol on the watchtower, and a young boy stepped through. Except he wasn't a boy, not entirely. He radiated power that made Loki's magical senses sing, divine energy wrapped around a mortal frame. When he spoke, his voice carried echoes of thunder and wisdom beyond his apparent years. Sorry, I'm late, Shazam said. Was dealing with a situation in Fawcett City. You must be Loki. He extended a hand with genuine enthusiasm. I'm Billy, well, Shazam when I'm transformed, but you can call me Billy. It's so cool to meet another god. Well, I'm not technically a god, I just channel their powers, but... Loki shook the offered hand, feeling the raw divine energy crackling beneath Billy's skin. You're a child, he said, not unkindly. They've given a child access to power that could reshape continents. I'm 15. Billy said defensively, and the wizard chose me because I have a pure heart. Pure heart, Loki repeated, looking at the assembled heroes. You trust world-threatening power to a 15-year-old based on purity of heart. It's worked so far, Superman said. Billy has saved the world multiple times. And I have contingencies if it stops working, Batman added, because of course he did. Loki studied the young hero, seeing echoes of Thor in his enthusiasm, but also something his brother had never possessed, genuine humility beneath the power. Billy wielded the strength of gods but remained fundamentally, innocently human. You remind me of someone, Loki said finally. He was also given power far beyond his wisdom and asked to save worlds. The difference is, you seem to actually want to do good rather than simply prove yourself worthy. Was he your brother? Billy asked with unexpected perception. How did you? Solomon's wisdom, Billy tapped his head. I can read people pretty well when transformed, and you have this look when you talk about power and worthiness, like you're remembering someone specific, someone you love but also resent. Loki felt something crack in his chest. This child, this genuinely good soul wrapped in divine power, had seen through centuries of carefully constructed walls in seconds. His name is Thor, Loki heard himself say. And yes, he's my brother, was my brother. I'm not sure what we are anymore after everything that's happened between us." "Family's complicated," Billy said with the authority of someone who'd clearly experienced his own share of complications. "But that doesn't mean it's over. Maybe being here in a different universe gives you perspective to figure out who you want to be when you go back." "When did you get so wise?" Loki asked. Billy grinned. "I channel Solomon, remember. Though honestly, this is mostly just stuff my foster parents taught me. They're really good people." The casual mention of foster parents who were really good people struck Loki harder than any of Darkseid's Omega beams. This child had found a genuine family despite being an orphan with godlike power. Loki, born to royalty and raised by kings, had spent his entire existence feeling like an outsider in his own home. "Right then," Constantine said, breaking the moment with perfect timing. "Enough emotional bonding. Loki needs rest, and we need to plan for when Darkseid realizes he's been had. I give it 72 hours before he's back and monumentally pissed." "Agreed," Batman said. "Loki, you'll remain in the Watchtower until we've established proper security protocols. Zatanna and Constantine will begin your magical training tomorrow. Flash and Cyborg will brief you on current global threats, and I'll be monitoring everything you do." "How reassuring," Loki said dryly. "Anything else?" "Yes," Wonder Woman said. "Welcome to the Justice League, Loki of Asgard. Try not to betray us. It would be inconvenient." As the heroes dispersed to their various duties, Loki found himself alone with Superman. The Kryptonian hadn't moved, his expression thoughtful. "You didn't have to help in Metropolis," Superman said quietly. "You could have run, hidden, let us deal with Darkseid while you escaped." "Why didn't you?" Loki considered lying. It would be so easy, claim tactical advantage, suggest he was playing a longer game, maintain the image of pure self-interest. But something about Superman's genuine curiosity, the complete absence of judgment, made him answer honestly. "Because I'm tired," he said simply. "Tired of being the villain everyone expects. Tired of schemes that blow up in my face. Tired of surviving while everyone I care about suffers. And when I saw those civilians being dragged toward the boom tubes, I remembered what it felt like when Thanos' army did the same to people I'd sworn to protect. I remembered failing them." He met Superman's eyes. "I didn't want to fail again." Superman nodded slowly, and Loki saw something shift in his expression. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of trust. The recognition that even trickster gods could have moments of genuine heroism. "Then let's make sure you don't," Superman said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to send you home, and how to keep you alive long enough to get there." As Superman left, Loki sank back onto the medical bed, exhaustion finally overwhelming his pride. Through the Watchtower's windows, he could see Earth rotating slowly below, a blue marble that wasn't quite home but might be sanctuary for a while. Somewhere in the void beyond, Darkseid was hunting phantoms Loki had created. And somewhere in another universe entirely, Thor was probably searching for him, assuming his brother was alive to find. Loki closed his eyes and, for the first time in longer than he could remember, felt something other than fear or ambition. He felt hope. It was terrifying. 3 days passed in what Loki would later describe as the most surreal magical education of his millennium-long existence. Zatanna proved to be a ruthlessly efficient teacher, her backward speech incantations demonstrating a relationship with magic that bordered on conversational. Where Loki had spent centuries forcing reality to bend through sheer will and carefully constructed illusions, Zatanna simply asked reality politely, and it complied. "You're thinking like a conqueror," she explained on the second day, watching him struggle to levitate a simple cup using DC's magical framework. "You're trying to dominate the mystical energies, but magic here responds better to partnership. You have to seduce it, not subjugate it." "Seduction, I understand," Loki replied, and finally felt the cup rise smoothly into the air. "It's the partnership that's foreign." Constantine, observing from his perpetual position of studied indifference, snorted. "That's your problem in a nutshell, mate. You've spent so long manipulating everyone around you that genuine cooperation feels like weakness. Says the man who's damned half his friends to hell for the greater good, Loki shot back. Exactly. I'm a cautionary tale, not a role model. Constantine lit another cigarette, his third in an hour despite Zatanna's increasingly pointed glares. But at least I admit I'm a bastard. You still pretend there's nobility in your schemes. The observation stung precisely because it contained truth. Loki had always justified his deceptions as necessary, as protecting Asgard through methods Thor's honor wouldn't allow. But stripped of that context, trapped in a universe where his schemes served no kingdom or cause, he was forced to confront an uncomfortable question. What was he without his lies? The answer came unexpectedly on the fourth morning, when alarms shattered the watchtower's routine. Boom tube activity, Cyborg announced, his voice tight with tension. Multiple signatures, apocalyptic energy but not Darkseid's personal frequency. He sent his Furies, Batman said grimly, already moving toward the armory. He's escalating faster than predicted. Loki joined the rush to the command center, still wearing the simple training clothes Zatanna had provided. Through the main view screen, he watched 3 boom tubes tier reality open simultaneously, one above Gotham, one over Metropolis, one positioned directly above the watchtower itself. From the portals emerged beings that radiated practiced cruelty. Granny Goodness, ancient and terrible, leading Paradum and shock troops. Lashana, whip already crackling with Omega energy. And Mad Harriet, her claws extending as she shrieked orders in languages that predated human civilization. He's dividing our attention, Wonder Woman observed, already donning her armor. 3 simultaneous attacks across maximum geographic spread. And he's specifically targeting the watchtower, Superman added. This isn't reconnaissance. He wants Loki badly enough to risk direct assault on Justice League headquarters. How flattering, Loki muttered, his magic already surging in response to perceived threat. The dampening bracelet had been removed during training, a calculated risk Batman had accepted after Zatanna vouched for Loki's progress. Now, unrestricted power sang through the god's veins, harmonized with DC's mystical frequencies in ways that felt simultaneously foreign and more natural than his original Asgardian sorcery. Standard defensive formation, Batman commanded. Superman, Metropolis. Wonder Woman, Gotham. Flash, civilian evacuation, both locations. Green Lantern, you're with me defending the watchtower. Cyborg, maintain boom tube countermeasures. Shazam, I'll go where I'm needed most, Billy said, already wreathed in lightning. And me? Loki asked. Batman turned and Loki saw calculation warring with something that might have been trust. You stay here. Watchtower's magical defenses are formidable, but the Furies specialize in breaking exactly these kinds of barriers. Constantine and Zatanna will handle mystical countermeasures. You're their backup. You're benching me during the fight I caused, Loki said flatly. I'm positioning you where your specific skill set is most valuable, Batman corrected. The Furies are trained warriors who have fought for millennia. They'll expect confrontation. What they won't expect is a trickster god who can make them fight phantoms while our actual defenses tear them apart. Despite himself, Loki smiled. You want me to cheat? I want you to win. Ethics are secondary to survival. Batman's expression hardened. But low-key, if you betray us now, if this is some elaborate scheme to deliver the watchtower to Darkseid, I won't hesitate. The contingency I've prepared for you is already armed. What contingency? You'll never know unless you force me to use it. Batman turned away. Don't make me use it. The Justice League dispersed with practiced efficiency, boom tubes and super speed, carrying them to their assigned battlefields. Within seconds, Loki found himself alone in the command center with Constantine and Zatanna, watching multiple view screens display simultaneous catastrophes. In Metropolis, Superman clashed with Granny Goodness and her Paradum and Horde, his heat vision carving through the swarm while Granny's Omega-powered weapons actually drew blood from the Man of Steel. In Gotham, Wonder Woman's sword sang against Lashana's whips, the two warrior women trading blows that shattered buildings. And approaching the watchtower, Mad Harriet led an assault team equipped with technology designed specifically to breach Justice League defenses. "Right," Constantine said, already tracing mystical sigils in the air. "Zatanna handles the defensive wards. I'll work on offensive countermeasures. Loki, you're our wild card, literally. Make them see things that aren't there, believe lies we haven't told yet. Gaslight an army." "Finally, someone who appreciates my talents," Loki replied, his magic already weaving through the watchtower's systems. He'd spent 3 days learning DC's mystical framework. Now he would demonstrate exactly how dangerous a motivated trickster god could be when given proper tools. The first wave of parademons breached the outer hull, tearing through reinforced alloys with mechanical efficiency. They encountered Zatanna's wards and simply stopped, frozen mid-assault as backward speech incantations rewrote the laws of physics around them. "Terder DNA unit knock Sessufer emit, Snopo Roy Por D," Zatanna commanded, and the parademons' weapons clattered to the floor as time itself rejected their continued function. But Mad Harriet wasn't so easily deterred. The Fury shattered through the frozen time field with her claws, new god physiology allowing her to simply ignore lesser magical constraints, and lunged for the command center with murder in her mechanical eyes. She encountered a dozen Lokis, each one perfectly real, each one wearing a different expression ranging from terror to smug satisfaction. Her attack algorithms couldn't process which target to prioritize, and in her moment of hesitation, Constantine's offensive magic struck. "Ignis Inferni," the Hellblazer intoned, and hellfire erupted from nowhere, wrapping around Mad Harriet in chains forged from damned soul's anguish. "Borrowed from a demon I've got a complicated history with. Should hold a fury for at least." Mad Harriet tore through the hellfire chains like tissue paper, her scream of rage shaking the watchtower's foundation. 30 seconds, Constantine finished. "Bollocks." Loki was already moving. His illusions multiplied, but these weren't simple visual tricks anymore. He'd learned from Zatanna's partnership approach, from Constantine's understanding that magic responded to conviction rather than just power. These illusions believed they were real, and that belief made them temporarily substantial. A dozen Lokis attacked Mad Harriet from every angle. She slaughtered half of them before realizing they were projections, but those crucial seconds allowed Zatanna to complete her next incantation. "Neusnamid Egerak Nertzelitzak 8 Ot Denifnak Eb Iraf Dilem," she commanded. Reality twisted, and Mad Harriet found herself suddenly suspended in a pocket dimension that looked exactly like the watchtower, but contained only endless corridors leading nowhere. She would rage through that maze for hours before Justice League mystics could safely extract and imprison her. "Two down," Zatanna said, sweat beading on her forehead. "But the parademon swarm is adapting to my wards. We need a different approach." "I have an idea," Loki said, his tactical mind already 3 moves ahead. "But it requires you both to trust me completely for approximately 90 seconds. Constantine and Zatanna exchanged glances. "That's a terrible idea," Constantine said. "Absolutely horrible," Zatanna agreed. "We're doing it anyway, aren't we?" Constantine sighed. "Yes," they said in unison. Loki smiled and began to cast. But this wasn't Asgardian sorcery or even DC magic as Zatanna taught it. This was something new, a synthesis of his millennium of deception, and this universe's mystical framework, powered by the strange conviction he developed over the past 4 days that maybe, possibly, he could be someone other than the villain. The spell rippled outward from the watchtower like a stone dropped in cosmic waters. Every parademon in the assault force suddenly perceived their fellow parademons as Justice League heroes. Friend or foe identification protocols corrupted on a fundamental level, not through technology, but through pure narrative magic that rewrote the story of who was enemy and who was ally. The parademon swarm turned on itself with mechanical efficiency, tearing through their own forces while Loki maintained the illusion through sheer force of concentrated will. Sweat poured down his face, his magic burning like fire through his veins, but he held the spell steady. Bloody hell, Constantine breathed. You're not just fooling their senses, you're rewriting their fundamental perception of reality. Narrative magic, Zatanna said with growing awe. You're not just creating illusions, you're changing the story they believe they're part of. That's master-level sorcery. It's also killing me, Loki gasped, feeling his magical reserves draining at catastrophic rates. So if you have an exit strategy, now would be excellent timing. Zatanna's hands moved in complex patterns, backwards words tumbling from her lips faster than conscious thought. Nidnitsrednu reet DNA sesuak esikal edulpmak, snomaderap LLA. The spell solidified, and Loki felt Zatanna's magic lock his illusion into place, making it permanent rather than maintained. The parademons would continue fighting each other until physically restrained or destroyed, their corrupted perception now unbreakable. Loki collapsed to his knees, magic completely spent for the second time in 4 days. You magnificent, manipulative bastard, Constantine said, actually sounding impressed. You just turned Darkseid's army into its own worst enemy using pure conceptual warfare. Through the view screens, Loki watched the other battles resolving. Superman had beaten Granny Goodness into submission, his heat vision finally overwhelming her ancient armor. Wonder Woman had bound Lashana with her own whips, and the Fury's weapons turned against her through superior combat skill. And across all 3 battlefields, the parademon swarms were destroying themselves with mechanical precision. Watchtower to all teams, Cyborg's voice came through comms. Hostile forces neutralized. I repeat, hostiles neutralized. Whatever Loki did, it worked. Of course it worked, Loki muttered, accepting Zatanna's offered hand to stand. I'm the god of mischief. Turning enemies against themselves is literally my primary function. Your primary function used to be causing chaos for personal gain, Batman's voice said from behind them. Loki spun to find the Dark Knight had materialized in the command center at some point during the battle, silent as a ghost. How long had he been watching? Now your primary function appears to be tactical asset, Batman continued. Well done. You saved the Watchtower and possibly hundreds of League personnel. Don't sound so surprised, Loki said, though he couldn't quite suppress his smile. I'm capable of heroism when properly motivated. What motivated you today? Batman asked, and Loki recognized it as a test. He considered lying, could claim strategic self-interest, suggest he was protecting his only route home, maintain the comfortable fiction that he was simply being pragmatic. But something about these past 4 days, training with Zatanna's patient instruction, Constantine's brutal honesty, Billy's genuine kindness, and even Batman's suspicious contingency planning, had cracked something in Loki's carefully constructed armor. I was motivated by not wanting to disappoint you, Loki admitted. Any of you. You've treated me as a potential ally rather than an inevitable threat. You've given me chances I haven't earned and trust I don't deserve. And for once in my extremely long existence, I wanted to actually be worthy of that faith rather than simply pretending to be. The silence that followed felt like standing on a precipice. Then Superman entered the command center, his cape singed and a cut along his cheekbone already healing, and smiled. See, Bruce, I told you he had heroic potential. Heroic potential doesn't mean heroic certainty, Batman replied, but his hand extended toward Loki, offering a handshake. But it's a start. Good work. Loki stared at the offered hand like it was a bomb. Batman, the man who trusted no one, who maintained kill switches for his own teammates, who had literally told Loki he'd prepared contingencies to destroy him, was offering acknowledgement of a job well done. He took the hand. Batman's grip was firm, brief, and completely sincere. Don't let it go to your head, Batman said. You're still on probation, still being monitored, and if you betray this trust, the consequences will be severe. I would expect nothing less, Loki replied. Though I am curious, what contingency did you prepare for me? Batman's smile was terrifying in its brevity. You'll never know unless you make me use it. That's the point. Over the next few hours, the watchtower returned to controlled chaos. Captured Furies were transported to specialized containment, damaged systems were repaired, and Justice League members cycled through medical evaluations. Loki found himself swept up in the routine, no longer a prisoner or even a guest, but something approaching an actual team member. Wonder Woman commended his tactical thinking. Flash peppered him with questions about multiversal magic theory. Cyborg analyzed the spell structure he'd used, fascinated by how narrative magic could interface with technology. Even Hal Jordan grudgingly admitted the strategy was pretty clever for a magic user. But it was Billy, Shazam, who found Loki in the Watchtower's observation deck hours later, staring at Earth's slow rotation below. "You okay?" the young hero asked, transforming back into his teenage self to sit beside the god. "I just saved the Justice League's headquarters using skills I developed through centuries of lies and betrayals," Loki said quietly. "I turned a weakness into a strength, and everyone's proud of me. It's disorienting." "Maybe you're not weak for being a trickster," Billy suggested. "Maybe you're just powerful in ways people don't usually recognize as heroic." "Thor never understood that," Loki admitted. "He saw my magic as cowardice compared to his hammer. My strategies are deception compared to his honor, and I believed him, convinced myself that if I wasn't strong like him, I was worthless." "But you're not worthless," Billy said with the absolute conviction of someone who channeled Solomon's wisdom. "You're just different, and this universe needs different kinds of heroes. We've got plenty of people who can punch through planets. We need people who can outthink cosmic tyrants." Loki turned to study the boy who was also a god. "You're remarkably wise for 15. "I've had good teachers," Billy said simply. Then, after a pause, "Will you go back to your universe when we figure out how?" The question hung in the recycled air of the observation deck. Loki had been avoiding thinking about it, but now, forced to confront the choice, he found himself genuinely uncertain. "I don't know," he admitted. "In my universe, I'm the villain who occasionally helps when it's convenient. Here I'm something else, something that might actually matter beyond my relationship to Thor or Asgard." "You matter in both universes," Billy said, "but maybe here you get to discover that without all the baggage." Before Loki could respond, Batman's voice came through the observation deck speakers. "Loki, report to the medical bay. Dr. Fate has arrived to examine the dimensional breach's effects on your physiology." "Dr. Fate," Loki repeated. "The Lord of Order who wears a possessed helmet. Should I be concerned?" "Probably," Billy admitted. "Fate's kind of intense, but he's also the most powerful magic user on Earth. If anyone can figure out how to send you home safely, it's him." Loki stood, straightening his borrowed Justice League training uniform. Through the observation deck window, he could see Earth continuing its eternal rotation, a world not his own, but one that had somehow become important nonetheless. "Thank you, Billy," he said quietly, "for seeing something in me worth believing in." "That's what heroes do," Billy replied, grinning. "We believe in people's potential, even when they don't believe in it themselves." The medical bay proved to be less intimidating than Loki had feared, despite Dr. Fate's imposing presence. The Lord of Order floated cross-legged in the air, his golden helmet gleaming with ageless wisdom, while Kent Nelson, the human host, occasionally surfaced to ask clarifying questions in a much friendlier voice. "The dimensional breach is healing," Fate intoned, his voice resonating with harmonics that suggested multiple beings speaking simultaneously. "But the scar tissue between realities remains. It will take approximately 6 weeks before travel through the breach is safe. Premature transit would result in complete molecular dissolution. So I'm trapped here for 6 weeks, Loki said. "You are given 6 weeks to decide who you wish to be," Fate corrected. "The Order sees possibilities in you, Loki of Asgard, paths branching toward heroism and villainy in equal measure. Your choice will echo across realities." "No pressure then," Loki muttered. Fate's helmet turned toward him, and Loki felt the weight of cosmic judgment assessing his soul. You fear becoming your brother, but you also fear becoming yourself. Both fears are equally limiting. What would you have me do? I would have you choose, fate said simply. Not based on what others expect, but on who you wish to be when you look at your reflection in truth's mirror. Then without warning, Kent Nelson surfaced, the ancient voice replaced by grandfatherly warmth. What he means is, you've got time to figure it out, kid. Stick around, help the League, learn from people who have made their own transitions from darkness to light. Then decide. And if I decide to return home and resume being the god of mischief, then at least it'll be a choice, Kent said kindly. Not a role you're playing because it's all anyone expects from you. As Dr. Fate departed, leaving Loki with more questions than answers, the god found himself wandering the Watchtower's corridors. He passed the trophy room, filled with artifacts from 1,000 defeated villains, and the training center where League members honed skills that could reshape worlds. He found the library, discovered Constantine had left a note recommending several grimoires about redemption arcs, and felt something in his chest that might have been laughter or might have been tears. 6 weeks to decide who Loki of Asgard wanted to be. In his own universe, such a question would have been irrelevant. He was the trickster, the liar, the eternal second best. But here, in this universe of heroes who had contingency plans for their own corruption, who maintained hope even in darkness, who believed that even gods could change. Here, the question felt like it might actually have an answer. Loki found himself back at the observation deck as night fell over North America. The lights of cities sparkled below, Metropolis's optimistic brilliance, Gotham's defiant shadows. All the spaces in between where ordinary humans built lives worth protecting. "Penny for your thoughts?" Superman asked, floating into the deck without bothering with the door. "I was thinking," Loki said slowly, "that in my universe I spent a millennium trying to prove I was worthy of being Thor's equal. And it never mattered how clever I was, how many realms I saved through cunning. It was never enough." "Because you were measuring yourself by the wrong standard," Superman said. "You were trying to be Thor instead of being Loki." "Exactly." Loki smiled despite himself. "But here, you celebrate Batman for being Batman, even though he's just a human with gadgets compared to your godlike power. You respect Constantine despite him being a chain-smoking disaster. You trust a 15-year-old with power that could crack planets because you see his pure heart rather than his inexperience." "We celebrate people for who they are, not who we wish they'd be," Superman agreed. "That's what makes us a team instead of just a collection of powerful individuals." "In 6 weeks, I can return home," Loki said. "Dr. Fate confirmed it, but I'm not sure I want to. Not yet. There's something here I never found in Asgard, the genuine possibility that I could be valued for my actual strengths rather than constantly compared to someone else's completely different abilities." Superman's hand settled on Loki's shoulder, warm and solid and completely without judgment. "Then stay, learn, grow, and when you do go home, take with you the knowledge that being a trickster doesn't make you less than a warrior, just different. And if I choose to stay permanently, then the Justice League will be lucky to have you," Superman said, "probationary period and all." As Superman departed, Loki remained at the window, watching Earth turn beneath an alien sky. Somewhere out in the void, Darkseid was hunting for equations that didn't exist, chasing lies Loki had crafted with such precision that even a new god believed them. In 6 weeks, a choice awaited: return to the universe where he was always Thor's problematic brother, or remain in one where he might become something more. But for now, for these stolen weeks between worlds, Loki had something he'd never possessed before: the freedom to discover who the god of mischief could be when not defined by others' expectations. The Watchtower's lights reflected in the observation deck window, and Loki caught his own reflection, still sharp-featured, still carrying the weight of 1,000 deceptions, but somehow standing straighter. Less like someone pretending to be worthy and more like someone who might actually become it. "Hope shines brightest in the darkest night," he murmured, remembering the Justice League's constant refrain. For the first time in his extremely long existence, Loki understood what they meant. And in understanding, he began to believe it might be true.